In today's video, we're going to show you step-by-step how to change your oil on a 98 to 2001 Yamaha R1. We will include torque specs for the drain bolt. I do recommend that you just tighten the oil filter by hand as much as you can. So here's the oil that we will be using today. It is some AMSOIL 10W40 full synthetic. This oil is very good. I've used it in my R1s for years, and the bike has run flawless, and I've never had any issues. So this is the stuff I use. I do recommend it. It does make the engine more quiet when it's running. Here is the part number for the crush washer if you want that. And we have our OEM oil filter. And there is the part number for that. So let's get started in changing this oil. First thing you want to do is, if you have a stand, put it up on there just so you can get some extra room for the cowl when you're trying to take it off. It is not needed, but if you have one, it will probably make the job a lot easier. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a cloth or some type of cardboard or something under here so that when we take off all the bolts and we pull this whole fairing out as one piece, it will not get scratched. Obviously, you don't want to mess up your fairing, so it is important to do that. First thing you want to do is take out 5 bolts. There's one here, here, and here. There will be one right here that you need to take out, and there will be another one right here. You repeat it on both sides. After you got all the bolts out, you need to start pulling this out a little bit. You may need to turn these a little bit as you're doing it. So these need to unlatch. They are just quarter turn screws. This one I might have to get a little bit more. All right, as you can see, it's starting to come down. We got this one out. Now, when we repeat it on the other side, it's probably going to go to the ground. This is why we have this blanket here. And after it goes to the ground, we're just going to kind of run it across the blanket with the whole thing in one unit and twist it out like that. As you can see, we have the fairing down. Now we're just going to carefully turn it like this. I might have to pull the fairing a little bit. Since we got our fairing off now, we're going to move the rag and we will start the bike up and we will get it to operating temperature. Yes, you can change it without starting the bike, but I do recommend it because it will get the oil hot and it will get more of the oil out. So we are going to start the bike up now. We're going to let it get up to 220 degrees. We'll let the fan cool it down, and then we'll shut off the bike and start draining the oil. All right, we got the bike all warmed up, so now we'll start draining the oil. I usually like to get the bike up to a good operating temp around 200 plus. This thing's at 212 right now, so it's perfect. Turn that off. We'll get our oil pan. We are going to wear some gloves just because the oil is going to be hot. The drain bolt is right over here, right? Where my finger is, right there. That's a 17 millimeter. First, crack the bolt. All right, I cracked the bolt. Now I am going to use this to get the bolt out. At some point, it's going to get where it's going to fall out. So you have to be careful of it to not drop the bolt into here. If you do, quickly grab it and get a paper towel ready just in case that happens. Also, you want to be careful of the exhaust. It is going to be hot, so make sure that you don't end up touching it. This is hand loose. I'm going to keep loosening this. And then eventually it's just going to come right out. And it is going to pour out pretty fast since it's hot. So be careful that you do not want to get burned. And here it comes. So we will let this drain. I'm glad I did grab the paper towel because I do got some oil on my hand and on the tool itself. We'll let this sit until this thing fully comes out. We're going to go on the other side and open the cap for where you put your oil in, and that should help it flow it out even more. So we're going to let this oil drain for probably at least a half hour to an hour. I really want to get everything out of here as much as possible, and that's why we heated up the bike, so the oil will be, you know, a lot more free flowing because it's heated up. So we'll get back to this in a half hour, and it should be done dripping by then. So the oil is basically done dripping for the most part. We did get some tin foil and we put it over our headers. This is definitely important because you don't want to get oils on the headers, especially if you have a nice system like an aftermarket one that costs a lot of money, especially if it's titanium. So we put this here, so it kind of has a little cup and a place to run down so that it will go into the pan. So we're going to loosen this up right there. We'll turn it to the side, empty it out into here, and let it drip down into the oil pan. All right, so I have my wrench on here. I'm just going to turn it by hand. This is actually pretty simple because it was not too tight, which is good. If you're running OEM headers with the OEM oil filter, you would use a tool like this. You can get it at, you know, a Yamaha dealership. Pops right in, you use the ratchet, and you take it off. So I'm just going to let this come out now. Since we're going to start loosening it, you can see it's starting to come out. And that's why we put that in there, so it can drain into there. If we do get some on the headers, what we'll do is we'll just let it either burn off or we'll use some cleaner. We'll probably use some like brake cleaner on there and then just clean it off good. Like I said, I'm going to loosen this enough so that it drips out a lot, so that we can basically get all that oil out before we start taking off the filter. Since it's basically there, we'll end up taking this off now. So just keep turning it. It's going to pop off in about a second. And then you'll just have to literally pull it down and then out of the way. So as you can see, a lot more oil did come out of this thing. So I do like to stick to the OEM stuff. You could use whatever ones you want. This one's a little dirty over here, probably just from taking it off the pan. So like I said, we'll let all this drip. I'm going to pour out this oil filter and we will clean all this up. I will take the tin foil, pull it out of the way, and let the oil drip into the pan. All right, so we will grab this out of the way. Let this drip down into here. What's great about the tin foil is you can just crunch it up, let the oil drip out of here, and then you can get rid of it. So the oil has stopped dripping completely. We got our old crush washer off, and we put our new one on. We cleaned up the bolt before we put the cross washer on. Now I'm going to clean up the threads where the oil drain plug was, and same for the threads and around that area that the oil filter goes. Threads are clean. We will put the new bolt in. Always start the bolt by hand because you do not want to cross thread it. Get the bolt in there and we'll tighten it up as much by hand. All right, it's tightened by hand. We will get our torque wrench. The manual states to torque this to 43 Newton meters, which is basically 31, 32 foot-pounds, but we're going to do 31 foot-pounds, and that should be more than enough. Before I use the torque wrench, I'm just going to tighten this by hand for a bit, just so that we could crush that crush washer. And then once it starts to get tight, which it is, then I'll get the torque wrench. Make sure you get a clean funnel. Then we're going to pour our first quart in. We'll let it sit for a bit just to make sure that we don't have anything leaking. So we check to make sure we don't have any leaks. So I'm going to put the other 2 quarts in. We have our 3 quarts in. As you can see, the sight glass does look like it's 100% full, but now we will start the bike and you will see this drain. I am going to let the bike run for probably like 30 seconds just so that we can get the amount of oil needed into the oil filter, and you will see that this level does drop. Since our 3 quarts are in, we're going to very slowly add a little bit of oil to this. It's not going to be too much. I could still see a little of the oil right here. You want to get it to at least the middle to 3/4 of the way up. So I'm going to add a little bit right now and let it sit for a few minutes just to see where it's going to go. You'll see the oil start dripping down at some point. Right there it is. So this is the part where you have to be patient and not put too much oil in at once. You need to put a little bit at a time to see where the level is going to end up. As you can see, there's 2 marks on the casing, the low mark and the high mark. You either want to get it between the 2 or on the upper mark. A lot of people usually end up doing that upper dot. So as you can see, we're at the correct level and you are basically good to go. So just taking a quick look at how much oil we used. We really did not use that much, definitely not a half a quart for sure. And this was with the oil filter change and letting it drip for about an hour. So just to give you a general idea, you will need to buy 4 quarts when you do this. Another thing that's probably a good idea to do is to check out the old oil to see if there's any metal flakes or anything like that. Because if you got some, then you probably got a problem. But as I empty this into the container, I'll just take a look at it, have a light going so I can really take a look at it and see how it looks. I don't see anything out of the ordinary over here besides it just being dirty, which is how it should be. So I think we should be all good, but don't forget to take a look at the old oil just to see what's going on. Since the oil level is all set, we will put our cap back on. We look to make sure that it has the O-ring, which it does. So we'll screw this back onto here and then we'll tighten it by hand as much as we can. And then what I like to do is I like to use something like this just to snug it just a tiny bit, just to make sure that it's tight. You don't want it to go too crazy with something like this because you can snap the plastic. So that should be good. And then after that, it's basically just put the cardboard, or in my case, I use the blanket, put the fairing back in the same way you did, and then just start connecting all the bolts, and you're done. All right, guys, so hopefully this video was helpful. It is not a hard process on these bikes. It's relatively easy, and with the headers, even with the stock oil filter, you could still get the tool in there and get a wrench in there. So, you know, make sure you take care of these bikes because they are great bikes. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for the video. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out. This is a pretty easy bike to work on, but you know, there's some people that don't know it and they'll go to the dealer and they'll pay a lot of money. So this is something you could do at home, no problem. So don't be afraid to do it. This is literally a step-by-step video. All right, guys, we'll see you later.